Progress.
All right, welcome everybody to the Finance Committee meeting for October 19th, 2022. It is about 6:30 p.m. Let's go with the roll call.
Joe St. John,
Here.
Damon Capel,
Here.
Tim Goes,
Here.
Murray Neff,
Here.
John Grumney,
Here.
David Martin,
Here.
Cindy Cooper. Here. 7 present.
Thank you. Let's go to the minutes from the last meeting, September 21 of 2022. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Capel,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Grumney. Any further discussions? Corrections? Anything, Mr. Martin?
Nope.
Okay. All right, let's go with the roll call.
Damon Capel,
Yes.
John Grumney,
Yes.
Tim Goes,
Yes.
Joe St. John,
Yes.
Murray Neff,
Steve.
Cindy Cooper. Yes. David Martin.
Yes.
6 yeas, 1 abstention.
Minutes approved. Okay, we have a couple of, I would say, big ticket items on the agenda this evening. The first is the budget and a planning update for 2023. And I think Dana is here to talk about that. Feel
Yes.
free, go right ahead.
Okay, I've provided 2 pages on page 9 and page 10 for you to review regarding the budget. This first one, page 9, the consolidated budget overview, is the same sheet that you saw last Finance Committee. I've highlighted some of the changes that were made since then. And down at the bottom, you'll see version updates. And this is how I keep track of everything that's changed from version to version so that you can easily see what's new and what's different. Going through each of those, I've added the Deep Fiber Strategies contract appropriation of $36,500. I have increased the general fund appropriation by $12,000 for electronic road signs, and this came out of a discussion from our Monday morning meeting. The police department wanted to get some signs to indicate when road closures would happen in light of the recent parade and issues that have arisen from that.
Mhm.
I've also reduced the capital appropriations from 4 million down to 1.7 million, and that's in Fund 701. It's more in line with what we expect to spend in 2023. And finally, there was a transfer that I showed here on the transfers column for $253,350, and this is basically just for the debt service. That's for general fund debt that is paid from the debt service fund. So are there any questions on the changes that I've made?
Well, I see that 253,350 in general under transfers that came over from down in the lower left bond return fund, right?
Yes,
Line
that's
601.
correct.
Okay.
So nothing major has been changed, just some minor adjustments, but I'm happy to answer any questions. If none, I can move on to the next page. This is,
Any questions? Okay.
I listed out the capital projects by department and year. This is our 5-year projection of what each department expects to spend as far as capital goes. And the top section is streets, followed by sewer, then police and administration at the bottom. And all of these items are included in the budget if there's an asterisk next to it. And the items in the 2023 column that do not have an asterisk, I've indicated if the funds are available for that purchase in 2023. I believe most of them are available, all of them. So there's been really no major change on this spreadsheet aside from minimizing or reducing the capital expenditures from the $4 million on the building renovations. That was included on here previously in my previous version for about $800,000 in each department. You can see I've reduced that down to $150,000 in each department. And also the wastewater treatment plant upgrades was originally listed at 900,000, now it's 720,000. That's more in line with the engineer's estimate for 2023.
Yeah, for design services.
So this is just a high level overview. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has detailed questions. I'm more than happy to sit down with you in my office or over the phone. If you don't want to ask right now, just know that you can come call me or visit me anytime.
I visited Dana this week, so I really appreciate that.
I appreciate you coming.
Was she helpful?
Yeah,
Was it
very
productive?
helpful, yeah.
That's good. Excellent. So as far as the timeline is concerned, Dana, we have our next meeting in 2 weeks on November 2nd. We'll have the first reading of our ordinance.
Correct.
If there aren't any other changes or questions from us between now and then, this basically will
This
be
will be
it.
it.
Okay.
What I was gonna say is the first meeting in November, I would expect that we may have a first reading on the collective bargaining contract, which could impact the budget. We had a very productive meeting this week, and we're 99% of the way there. So just a few screams and fist pounds and we got it done.
I think you built some contingency, as I recall from our last finance meeting.
Yes, there's a contingency in here for the police.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, I don't think it's included in the budget. It's in my detail spreadsheet, right? It's in my detail and the impact. The impact of that projected impact is listed in my detail behind this, but it's not actually included in these numbers. So once I get with Mayor and go through those, if there's anything significant that's going to change, I'll be sure to discuss that with Finance Committee.
Great work.
Yeah, any other questions or concerns for Dana? There were two other items we had discussed this afternoon, Dana. They were favorable. I mean, let's see, we had the income, tax collections were up and the expenses were down slightly. I was just reading this here. Hold on just a second. Right, okay, yeah, the income projection was up because of up about 6%. Taxes collected due to primarily the population and economic growth.
Mhm.
Okay. And let's see, the expenses were slightly down. The West Cherry Turn Lane project amount, 591,000 was spent in 2021. Okay, we removed that project from the calculation. We're left with an increase of 10%. We go a little further, we remove all capital expenditures from the calculation. We see an increase of 18% over 2021. Okay. Again, go ahead. I can see you're chomping at the bit there. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. So I was just, I was answering a question from Mr. Ghost who had asked if I could shed some light on the decrease in the expenses year over year. And the main driver of that was the West Cherry Turn Lane project that was spent in 2021. There was about almost $600,000 spent on that wasn't spent in 2022. So there was a big decrease based on that primarily. However, when you take that out of the calculation and you look at all other general fund expenses, including general fund capital, then we still have an increase of about 10% year over year. And furthermore, when we take out all of the capital expenditures in the general fund, there's an increase of about 18%. Now that 18% is more in line with what your operating expenditures are, increasing your operating expenses. So that's definitely something to watch going forward, because that's quite a large increase. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that.
Okay. Any further questions, concerns? Thanks, Dana. All right. let's go to the facilities planning project. Mr. Hennessy, do you want to move forward with that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So beginning with packet page or at packet page number 11, the mayor had asked if the staff could put together a recommendation on how to proceed with the next steps on the facilities plan. And so that memo is outlines the recommendations, and I'll go through those here in just a moment. The recommendations were developed as a result of conversations with this team that you see here, the police chief, the deputy police chief, our services manager, and our services manager, I guess I should say. And it also then includes feedback or additional information that I've received from our municipal advisor regarding the debt service associated with borrowings at the amount recommended, and also some feedback from the owner's representative, David Collinsworth, who we've engaged to assist us in this project as well. So just a real quick background. As a reminder, we purchased 2 buildings earlier this year, 220 North Columbus, 32 Sedgwick, designate for $1.1 million. After a little bit of discussion early on, agreed that the North Columbus facility would be the police headquarters, the Sedgwick facility, or the Round Top, which I'll refer to for the services department. We then engaged MS consultants to help develop conceptual plans. We asked them to also put together preliminary cost estimates for the 2 new buildings and to renovate the municipal building after the police department vacates. We also then engaged Dave Collinsworth to assist us as the owner's representative. As I said, we, with the assistance of staff, MS consultants developed the plans, which are attached to this document on packet pages 15, 16, 17, and 18. And we asked them to take a 15-year planning horizon as we thought about, the space needs for the city. The estimated renovation cost for the 3 facilities came in at about $3.2 million and a 30% contingency. We'll talk more about that here in a second, bringing the architect's estimate to $4.2 million plus the cost of acquisition. Again, another $1.1 million, and then there's some design fees as well. The cost to renovate the facilities ranges in price from $150 per square foot for the services building or the Round Top, $180 per square foot for the municipal building, and $200 per square foot for the police department. Dave Collinsworth's memo is in here. The short answer is he thinks based upon what you see and based upon the extent of the changes that those ranges of per square footage costs are reasonable, although the contingency seems high. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about how to bring that contingency number down. Also suggesting that they may be high at this point because we're only at the conceptual stage of the development. We have not done the detailed construction drawings yet. The architect did indicate to me that as we work through the detailed design, there is an opportunity to introduce more cost-conscious design in the process by identifying the finishes, maybe making some additional tweaks to the plan as submitted. And that becomes important because I think part of the recommendation that you'll hear from us is that what we'll try to do is during the detailed design phase, embed more cost-conscious design into the plans that you see. So with that, I'll draw your attention to the table on the second page of the memo. So packet page 12. And it's probably easiest to kind of think about it as you look at these tables. So the second page, if you focus on the table, it's important to note that these numbers are estimates at this point. I want to make sure you know that. But what they can do is serve as a guidepost or even a cap if that's the way we want to go in terms of working closely with the architect. The top table shows all the costs of the acquisition, renovation, design, furniture allowance. I built in a furniture allowance and a technology allowance, as I said. So if you just quickly, $1.5 million was the consultant's estimate to renovate the police building, $1.128 million for the services, $561K for the, I'm sorry, $1.128 for municipal, $561,000 for services, total of 3.19. Like I said, they build in a 30% contingency. If you keep following that line across,
Mhm.
4.12 million is the subtotal, add in the acquisition costs. I've estimated the design cost, the detailed design cost at 9%. If you'll see, I don't have a definitive answer yet from the architect, but the
Although I did see Mr. Collinsworth opined it would be between 8 and
8 to
10%.
10%, right? So I picked 9%.
That's good. Yeah.
I picked 9% and I added in the design fees that we've already committed to.
Okay.
Following then all the way to the right, the total cost ends up being about 5.6, 5.7 million. Added in the allowances for a total project of 5.8, $5.9 million. All right. So the staff recommendation is as follows in the bottom table. So for the police department, what staff is recommending is that we proceed to the detailed construction drawings for the entry and the rear portions of the building only. So if you turn to page 15 in the packet,
Mhm.
and you look at the L-shaped building to the right, that first little block in the front, which shows the probation, an interview room, a lobby, a vestibule. So they're talking about basically building out that space. Leaving the center of the building, essentially those offices that are behind it unchanged. So what you see there suggests changes in those office spaces, but the staff recommendation is to maintain what exists today. And then to follow the detailed construction drawings from the break room and the restroom back. Essentially, it reduces about 20% of the cost. Again, that's an estimate. Bringing the estimated cost for the staff recommendation down to about $1.2 million.
As opposed to 1.5.
As opposed to 1.5.
Okay.
Exactly. Next, I'll talk about the municipal building. The staff recommendation there is proceed to the detailed construction drawings for the ground floor or the low or the ground level, which is basically the public space that you go in today. We've proposed basically to open up the lower level so they can do the detailed construction drawings for that, but not to go to the construction phase in terms of the lower level, because we really don't have any immediate plans, nor do we have any immediate need to finish out that space on the lower level. So rather than a $1.128 million project, that one could be more in the neighborhood of $825,000. The reason why it's even though it's half the building that doesn't get finished out, all the mechanicals in the building need to be adjusted. There are a fair number of windows that are proposed to be not only installed or replaced. So there are these expenses throughout the entire building that again don't necessarily cut it in half just because you don't finish out the lower space.
So to clarify then, the new 825 revised lower amount does include the mechanicals
Yes,
and the windows.
yes,
Okay.
yes, all of that stuff.
It's not anything on that lower level.
Other than to open it up, basically take out the center walls, keep the exterior or the perimeter offices in place. So they'll be used for essentially storage until they're needed at some future point in time. What I should say, and this is probably a good opportunity to say that, the design on the ground floor has enough space for 10 people. We currently have 6 administrative staff in the administrative building at the moment. When we talked to the architect, we talked about staff in 10 to 15 years probably being somewhere in the 10, 11 range. So this really will fit the space needs of city staff, at least as anticipated today, out through that time planning horizon we talked about earlier.
Okay.
So the trickier one or the trickiest one then really is the services building or the round top. So after some considerable discussion with staff, I think we would like to know, we'd like to be more confident about what's the best way to proceed with finishing out the office space or staff space for the services team. So what you have in front of you now envisions that they finish out the round top. So they're putting in new restrooms, they're reconfiguring walls, they're adding office space, they're limiting the amount of space though that would be available for any storage. There is storage space, but not not a lot of storage space. It really is designed to house the staff and kind of it might be working space for them as well. I think we've got some countertop space in there where they could work on maybe a vehicle or two at a time, nothing significant. So, you know, installing restrooms in an existing facility could be a costly proposition. So the thought was here that what we should do is we have asked the architect for the quote to do a second building, which we anticipate would be necessary anyway, not only to open up space for the reserves or the reservoirs park, but also the fact that the maintenance team at the moment is totally full. As you can see, they've even got stuff in the outside storage right now. It is going to be necessary long-term. So the thought was, let's go through the conceptual process, which is what we've done here on that second building, and determine what's the more cost-effective way to long-term deal with the staff space. And then it follows a couple of different paths, depending upon what that answer is. But what's shown here is essentially just making the minimum improvements to the round top at the moment. We do believe that it could house the staff in a temporary capacity with these modest improvements of 100,000 mechanical, electrical, and, you know, some adjustments, some other necessities, but not a lot there. So like I said, then after you determine what's the most cost-effective option, if it's the new building, fine. We move the staff over into the round top on a temporary basis, finish out the construction drawings on the new building, and then at some point we'll be back in front of council to talk about how to finance that new facility. But even at that, we've got a temporary space for the maintenance team. If it's determined that the round top is the more cost-effective option, then again, we could move the maintenance team in there now. We could begin the detailed construction drawings on both the round top, the round top and the new maintenance building. And then again, we'll be back in front of council to determine how do you want to finance those improvements going forward. So that's
For that new maintenance building potentially, or what location have you looked at something like that yet?
So we've asked them to look at the open space that the city already owns. So it's basically the property that is to the south side of Sedgwick. Now it's the 7 or 8 parcels, that exist.
Okay. Yeah, south, east,
Yes.
going up the street there.
Yeah, going up the street. Correct. Yeah, southeast.
Not across the alley.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
southeast from the round top, but across the street from where their current maintenance facility is today. So under that scenario, rather than a $5.8 million project, it ends up being a little bit closer to a $4 million project, estimated to be that. I still have a contingency in there of 15%, but after you go through the detailed construction drawings, that contingency number should come down anyway. 15% allows even a little bit more room for the uncertainty that's in the, the construction bidding world that we're in today. So again, they're estimates, but they also can be a guidepost in terms of, what we tell the architect is kind of the top end of what we want to spend for each of these facilities. So I don't know, Steve, any other thoughts?
I was just looking at some numbers. It looks like, so we shaved off, 1,842,000 of the original projected amount. Consultant's preliminary estimate of 5.8 million. That's about 31%, right?
Right. I want to be careful to note, though, it doesn't finish out the round top. There still is a question about that. So if we did go back to finishing out the round top, you have to add another $400,000+ to that number.
Yeah, they projected 561,000, well, plus a grand total of 729,300. And
So I do want to note that.
we're only going with 100.
So part of the savings are basically not doing anything significant at the maintenance buildings yet. But we do anticipate that there would be a longer term need at some point.
Yeah, about 600,000 would be that amount, right? Okay. Okay,
I'm sorry, if the clerk of court's office will be up there, but will court still happen in this building?
Yes.
And does that become an issue with getting stuff and people back and forth?
I wouldn't anticipate that it would. I mean, I don't know, Steve, unless you have different thoughts.
Half block versus about 3 blocks. They kind of pack up everything, and I don't think it'll be a big issue.
People that aren't familiar with the area, you know, sitting over there, they can just point their finger out the window, see that building? And I didn't know if that would create some confusion for some people or not. I agree, it's 3 blocks, 3 blocks is 3 blocks, you know, but it's still not what people around here are used to.
We'll take that into account, have some signage that.
Yeah. Okay.
So what's the, if you refresh my memory, what's the plan for the current administrative building then? If we're able to move everybody over to the new building, what's the plan for that building?
So we wouldn't be moving the administrative staff.
Okay.
So the administrative staff will stay
Still
in the
stay.
municipal building on the ground level, but from a, you know, I mean, actually it becomes probably critical from a staging perspective, right? You probably, I think, we haven't really talked through this with the architect, right? But probably finish the police department space first. You move the police department out, maybe you move the administrative staff down while you renovate the top floor. I don't know. Yeah. But you know, we've got to work through that. But anyway, at the end of the day, the administrative staff stays over in that building. The only people that would be moving would be the bailiffs and Kathy Hickson, who serves as
Right.
clerk of court.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we have built into the administrative building, you know, then there's a window for interacting with the public. So I mean, that's some additional staffing need, but we built that in to the human resources plan. Now, that probably won't happen. I mean, under this scenario, we probably could get, you know, if we act relatively quickly, whatever that means. I've talked to the architect and would still like to try to get the construction drawings done by the first quarter of next year so that we can be out to bid. And hopefully, you know, maybe by the end of the second quarter, we are, you know, at the construction phase. Hopefully we can get the police department in before the end of the year. Again, depending upon what happens with the maintenance building, even if it's temporary, you probably get the maintenance team over into the Round Top building, either again, whether it's temporary or permanent. But whether or not we can finish out the municipal building by then, it's probably not likely, but.
Yeah, I'm sorry to harp on. So how many people would actually be left in the current building when the new one opens up?
So 6 people currently.
6 people currently. Okay.
Now, we do have a zoning officer built into the budget for next year as well. So could be 7.
I only see 6 offices though, including an open office. So is the assumption folks will be sharing offices if you have enough for 10?
Yeah, so good question. So if you go to packet page 16, those, they're meant to be chairs. Kind of more in an open workspace
Okay.
environment. Yes.
Okay, I didn't know what those were. Thank you.
So those are kind of built-in desks, cabinets, whatever. That's kind of what they're showing as a workspace there too.
Okay.
Like an open workstation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Question on the financing.
Yeah.
Thanks for running these numbers by Baker Tilly and getting some initial cost estimates and financing options. One thing I was wondering about was just the mechanics of, we've already paid for the purchase of the building, $1.1 million. In this model, we're talking about financing that. How does that effectively work? We're financing it and we get the $1.1 million back in cash day one and then start paying over a 20-year period. In other words, freeing up capacity to do things like the services building in the future, potentially.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I mean, we haven't talked about what the financing schedule might look like, but yeah, as soon as we get the bids and have a firm number, we'd probably be back in front of council to talk about issuing a bond, again, for the full amount. So acquisition, renovation, plus design. So that's $4 million in cash, of which some amount goes back out, you know, as the construction is happening, but not all of it. $1 million, at a minimum, $1 million of that stays back because we've already spent that. So that reimburses us for our initial outlay.
And so, yeah, I'm sorry. I was looking at the debt load percentage. Their current debt obligation is 5.14% of annual income. So adding 300,000 of annual debt to the new bond with the $4 million bond, that's going to increase the load to 11% of annual revenues. Can you give us some perspective on that number? that percentage?
Yeah, typically you want to stay within between 20 and 30% of your a debt ratio. So this is well underneath the recommended amount of debt load to carry.
Okay, so even at the $4 million borrowing, we're significantly less than even 20%,
Significantly,
about
yes.
half of that.
Yeah, there's really no debt, no general obligation debt to speak of. It's very, very low. So we have lots of capacity for taking on new debt.
Yeah, the additional debt you mentioned here says about 8.4 million, but that's repaid from the sewer fund revenues and property tax assessments, not the general fund. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the, well, that's before the new wastewater plant expansion. That's a good point. So that's the old debt on the expansion of the plant. That's the Little Walnut Creek Interceptor. And then it's the bonds that are TIF backed or backed by TIF funds. So little, bits and pieces. So it ends up being about 8.4 million.
And those have revenue sources tied to it,
Yes.
whereas this is more or less like a student loan. It's uncollateralized. I mean, it's
It's income tax based.
right.
Based on. Yeah.
Is 20 years the proper term? Is there any reason to go to a 30 or 25?
Well,
Is that available?
We did ask Baker Tilly to run the numbers, and they did. The reason I was using or am using the 20-year term is based upon a conversation I had with Dave Collinsworth, and I think there's some logic to it as well. We gave him a 15-year planning horizon. I would anticipate that, at the end of that period, and I'm not saying we, but maybe the police department outgrows its space and now is looking for new space. You wouldn't necessarily want to be carrying a lot of debt for an old building while they've moved into a new facility. So I'm trying to align the term of the loan with the life of the asset.
Yeah. So hopefully it's zero.
It's a long
at that point in the future when we have to do it all over again.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, you could do it. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it might come down to about $220,000 a year. I think if it were a 30-year term, something I can get to the exact numbers, but
Yeah, and then you're paying a lot more in interest over time. Much
Yeah.
more.
So with the 15, or I'm sorry, let's see, this current setup here is 300,000 per year on debt service. That's a 20-year. Okay.
Dana, I had asked you a question offline the other day about fee revenue source. Have you had a chance to look into impact fee revenue as a potential?
Steve and I talked about that. And I think, again, we don't have the definitive word yet, but again, I think we all agree that we think that, impact fees could be used for debt service, but again, we've got to confirm that. It certainly could be used, you can certainly draw funds down and use it as a direct payment. But again, if we could borrow money and use the impact fees against future debt service, obviously, you're leveraging them a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And impact fees is you're doing it to increase capacity, growth pays for growth. And I would think conventional logic would say that you could use impact fee revenue to pay for this, but we're going to dot the I's and cross the T's before that's an option.
Has there been talk about using our ARPA funds towards this?
No, we've, I think, set those aside for an infrastructure improvement, perhaps sewer seems to be the priority.
Mhm.
So I know that's a lot. It's a big project and, the numbers I'm sure sounds like a lot and it is a lot, but, hopefully you feel that there's some degree of comfort in terms of, checking on the affordability, in terms of, comparing it with what other municipalities have done, hearing from, Dave Collinsworth, who has constructed a number of facilities through the years, when he was the city manager. So that's sort of one thing. That the only other thing I was going to say is, in terms of next steps. So if the finance committee is comfortable with proceeding, you're not making a decision tonight, but if you're kind of generally comfortable with the direction we're headed, what I think we need to do next, or would like to do next, is we need to determine the process for selecting the contractor to do the detailed construction drawings. And I say that because there's a provision in the state code that talks about bidding out projects of a certain size. However, our charter does allow for an exception to that based on a number of reasons. I wrote them down. So council could waive the competitive bidding if you determine it's a sole source provider, if there's an emergency, if funding could be lost, if the item is available through a cooperative purchasing agreement with the state, or if council determines that it is in the best interest of the municipality. So given that MS has been our designer up to this point, I think if we went with somebody else, you'd have the loss of time and certainly probably increased costs. And so maybe at the end of the day, we're able to determine that proceeding with them is in the best interest of the municipality. If so, I'd like to, begin to proceed with them, firm up the estimate in terms of what the design fees are going to be based upon the recommendation, and come back to council then for sign off to proceed at that point.
Is the vast majority of staff in each department comfortable with the 4 million number, the revised number that you have in here? In other words, did you get any really strong negative feedback?
Well, I think well, no. Let me just say no. I mean, Kathy didn't say no. She probably would have said no. I do think that the leadership team recognizes that it's a big project and that, they're trying to find the most cost-effective strategy for moving forward, but understanding that we are a city that's growing rapidly and has needs in terms of space. So I think what you have in front of you, and Steve, you can maybe weigh in on this as well, is that, is a reasonable sort of alternative that scales back the project to a size that maybe is more in line with, where the municipality is today and what its needs are in the near term.
Speak for the police. I know that they look long and hard on how to trim the number down. I think the initial numbers shocked all of us that saw them. I know Tim and I probably sat on a phone call, mostly in silence as we're reading through the initial proposal. We're not bringing this forward. Daryl and Steve, Dana, Kathy, go back and figure out what we can trim. But the police, I know, jumped on it. I know they've had several conversations with staff. The bottom line is the municipal building, it's beyond overdue. We are busting at the seams. Walk through the building anytime. The ceiling is falling in downstairs. We've got Amber with a partition, something you buy off Amazon or TJ Maxx so she can have a mini cubicle that's in the middle of a hallway right now. And I'm not saying that's the impetus to go out and do this. This is a strategic investment, not a putting out a fire investment. This is something where we want to get it right. We're expanding the capacity significantly for growth for the future. And the reason we paused on the services recommendation is you just start to look at the building. You're like, okay, we have the footprint building. It's an old bus garage. Are we really going to try to make this the accommodations for our services department long-term? The cost benefit of taking an old building and trying to rewire it for modern functions, our hypothesis is going to be more cost effective. You're going to gain more capacity by just building a new building, a steel shell, and configure it the way you want, as opposed to trying to do all the things that you have to do when you go through a full rehab or remodel.
Steve, we're
Many of the investments in the administrative building are needed just because of the age of the building and the siding, the envelope of the building, the HVAC systems, they all need addressed. And that's going to happen no matter what.
Generators, windows, roof, siding. You could maybe reconfigure the space slightly, add a couple more people. Thank goodness our police work shift work, or we would not fit. Just walk through the building if you think it's not needed.
My other comment would be just realize that we will have to come back with something for services. They don't have enough roof space, even with the round top. And they're going to need more roof space they take care of their equipment, and it needs to be inside. We had a vehicle lose a catalytic converter because it was outside. It was an older vehicle, but still it was a catalytic converter that went bye-bye. So, I think that's just as long as you realize in a number of months, there'll be a plan for that and that needs to happen also. Those are just my two comments.
Last thing I'll say on the cost estimate, I mean, month over month, every month this year, we've seen 7-8% inflation. I would venture to guess to say it's higher in central Ohio due to the demand on construction services. Once we went back and analyzed the numbers, I don't think MS's numbers nor Dave Collinsworth's assessment is off.
Yeah, I would agree. $150 per square foot for the round top, 180 for the municipal building redo, 200 per square foot for the police. That's pretty fair and reasonable in this
We're talking
economy.
about, I mean, adding bulletproof glass and reinforcement to walls and.
That's a whole different animal. Yeah, it's got to harden that building
Right.
with security.
Right.
Yeah, so that makes.
Yeah, and we're gonna do the same over at the municipal building, and we will improve the entry to make it safer. We'll actually add functionality with real conference room space over there. We'll manage the copier and our supplies, I think, in a better way. And of course, the downstairs space will be better for, retaining records, managing those records, at least in the short term.
Okay,
Well, are you looking for us to do anything in finance committee?
Well, again, other than is there consensus to, again, proceed to kind of get an estimate from MS at this point to do the detailed construction drawings as recommended. And then work with Bream just to make sure I've got the competitive selection process worked out before, try to get back to council. I'm not sure if we'll be back by the 2nd, but definitely back by November 16th with firm numbers for you to act upon in terms of next steps.
yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty comfortable with what you've done. I feel like you guys have really vetted MS's original estimates really well, done the research, done the extra work, and I'm comfortable with the 4 million figure and proceeding based on that premise and the numbers that you have in here in the plan. I don't know if anybody else feels any differently, but Mr. Mayor.
I agree with Tim.
I'm sorry, I just have one more
Yep,
question. I
no
promise. So, what I'm trying to, so the current building needs a lot of work, is what I'm hearing, the one. So, and as I'm looking at the sketches for the new municipal building, and I noticed like there's the lower level, we're gonna leave that alone for now. Just a curiosity question, why wouldn't we take the money that we would use to fix up the current building, devote that to the lower level, build that out, and I see there's building office spaces and move the staff all in one building? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure what additional staff you're moving into that.
Well, the
building.
6 you say it's at the current, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but the 6 that you have at the current municipal building.
Yep.
The one that needs the repairs.
Yep.
They would be coming over to the new building, correct?
They'll stay.
Right, but
Lower level is gonna, the first phase of that includes the opening up of the lower level as well.
okay, so this is the current building with the police, this is
Yeah.
where the police is. No?
Yeah.
Is this the new?
This is, you're looking at page 17.
Yeah.
Which is the proposed revised sketch for the municipal building, I
The
believe.
current.
Yeah.
municipal building. Okay, I'm sorry, I thought this was, I apologize,
Yeah.
then my misunderstanding.
There are modifications, page 17 is showing modifications. If I'm not mistaken, you're waiving the major modifications like the bathrooms and things like that.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna open it up.
Open it up, like, if you've been down there, there's some partition walls
I got
in
you.
this big storage area section that they're gonna remove. But they're not planning on making this offices. And I mean, some of them are offices today, but
Yeah.
need
That's
work
the lower.
offices.
Yeah,
That's the
right.
lower. This is
Upstairs.
the-
Is there any plan to have any detention area in the police department? Cause I don't see that on here.
Yeah, there's at least 2 places, I believe.
Well, are you talking, there's no plan for overnight detention. I mean,
Right.
that'll be down with the,
That's still gonna be with the
County.
county.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you meant like interrogation.
but yeah,
No.
yeah.
All right. I just didn't know if there was ever an emergency situation where they needed to detain somebody overnight or whatever, but
I think we've really
Yeah.
gotten out of that.
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Yeah, that was a big thing. That's a good point. That was a big point, a big conversation point as we were talking about this. The interview room that's in the back. Yeah, the police department was talking about, I mean, if they had to put somebody in there temporarily while they go do something, the thought was that they would have kind of see-through glass. They could keep an eye on a person who might be in there, but they're not going to be in there for long. I mean, they might be in there for an hour or two, you know, while something.
Right, yeah.
Breathalyzer, whatever they're doing, processing before they take them down to the county.
I know this is what you asked, but there is a second interview room right when you walk in the main lobby. It backs up to the detective room where there's also two-way glass. It's more of a intimate interrogation
Yes.
environment.
Okay.
Yeah, so from a higher level, I think the costs are accurate based on the 30% contingency built in. They're fair and reasonable, best I can tell. And then the main concern there is with the debt obligation and how to pay for it. And knowing that it's 11% and 20 to 30 is average. Can I use that word?
Mhm.
Is that accurate
Yeah.
for a municipality? Knowing that we're nowhere near that, I would call it a very affordable project.
Can I clarify what I think you're asking for? You're asking us to say, do we agree with the reduced scope? And to go and pursue the design services quote from MS?
Right, to bring back to
That's what
council.
you're asking. You're not asking us to authorize $4 million worth of
No,
expense.
right.
You're not asking us even to authorize the $270,000 quote estimated cost. You're just saying, can we go out and with the reduced scope and have them price it out?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
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 Great. Anyone not want to proceed in that fashion?
But do
Mr.
we have to have a
Neff, he's awful
motion and a
quiet
second
down
on that in a regular council meeting to authorize the expenditure, that kind of money? I don't
Well,
know.
again, we're not spending anything.
Nothing's being
Just give me
appropriated.
some guidance at this point, direction. So
So
I'll
you
go
don't
out.
have to pay for guidance?
Unless you're.
I hope not.
All right.
We're done with the consulting fees, right? At this point.
We are, yes, at this point we are.
Okay. Yeah, well, you need, do you have what you need from us then, Mr. Henderson?
I think I've got what I need.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left. There's nothing else here on the agenda, and we just have the highlights there of the monthly numbers. I'm sure you've all reviewed it. I did not see any glaring issues. Dana, did you want to point anything out in particular?
No, not necessarily, but I did have one comment about a project I've been working on after this, after you go through the highlights.
Okay. Anyone have any questions on the highlights? Okay, go ahead, Dana.
I just wanted to make note that with the mayor, I've been working with on a project with Rita and comparing the tax distributions that we've received from Rita with actual street data from the Delaware County Auditor's Office, just to compare and see where we are in terms of, are we collecting an adequate percentage of the number of homes that we know that we have? What does our income tax look like? Collected versus uncollected. So I'm in the middle of that right now. Just wanted to give you all a heads up that I am looking into that, and I'll brief you on it whenever I have some good information to share.
Thank you. Anything to add to that, Mr. Mayor?
No, I appreciate it, Dana. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Dana.
Just one other piece of that, when we are looking ahead of the November 2nd council meeting, we're looking to provide council with some information that around pupil counts. Sunbury Commerce Park is coming for a public hearing, that particular meeting. So this was born out of looking at finances, street, police impact, safety service. Murray, thanks for bringing that up initially, and look to provide you with some information related to that prior to the next meeting.
Good. Thank you, sir. I do not have anything further. Any other unfinished or new business? Okay, entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion.
Mr. Mayor, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Grundy. Discussion? Okay, go ahead.
Bill St. John,
Yes.
John Grumney,
Yes.
David Martin,
Yes.
Cindy Cooper,
Yes.
Murray Neff,
Yes.
Tim Goes,
Yes,
Damon Kaplan,
Yes.
7 yeas.
meeting adjourned. Thank you.
All right.
Yes. Is that the week you're out?
Early. Yeah.